Is UV mapping in Maya getting under your skin? Texel density terrorizing you? UV distortion depressing you? If you have no idea what the hell I'm talking about, that's alright, because I'm going to explain it all in my Maya UV mapping tutorial for beginners in the video coming up. What's going on, you 3D modeling beasts? This is JL Musey, and welcome to my Maya UV mapping tutorial for beginners. So, unless you want to stick with the good old cool gray Lambert material for a while, you'll probably need a good set of UV layouts when it comes down to texturing. I remember when I first started modeling, I used to hate UVs. I didn't get them. The tools that I used, it made my UVs look like crap. So I actually became a better modeler because I would actually try to model all the details versus having some details actually textured in. But at some point I hit the wall and I did have to learn how to lay out UVs and then get better at texturing. So what makes a good UV layout versus a poor one? Well, it really depends on your pipeline. So maybe if you're working on a personal project or a project from film or video, you have less stringent texture size requirements that will allow for maybe a sloppier or UV layout, or a UV layout that you're actually not packing as tight and you are wasting some pixels. Versus something that maybe you're going to take into Unreal, Unity, a game engine, where those texture sizes are going to be small and you really can't waste any pixels at all. Regardless of which way your final asset's going to be rendered, having a UV set that's well laid out will waste less pixels and be more efficient. So without further ado, let's get on with the video. So I'm going to go ahead and UV unwrap this soda can here, and I'm going to cover some of the tools within the UV editor. Not every single tool. Some of them I don't use as much, especially as Maya has progressed and got better with their current tool sets. Some of them are just kind of old school legacy stuff that I really don't touch. So I'll mainly cover the ones that I currently use while working in Maya 2018. So here you want to go ahead and enable your UV editor here. So we'll go ahead and get the UV editor, and right here we have a whole clump of nastiness. So before I get too deep into the tools, I'm going to cover some of the concepts that I explained in the intro. One of them was distortion, right? So to get distortion, well, let's go ahead and apply a UV layout and see what I'm talking about as far as distortion. So here you see that I currently have no UVs. So I'm going to go ahead and go to create. And here is a set of initial layouts that you could do, or mappings that you could do. So I'm going to go ahead and select a cylindrical. We'll go ahead and set project here, and we'll kind of see how it's projecting this. And it's actually wrapping them around the right way. So if I wanted to rotate this, right, maybe our cylinder was facing down, you could come down here in the options and change that, but it actually picked it up the right way, how I have it here. All right, so now we should get something that looks a little bit better. So now if I select this checkerboard icon, you see that it's getting our checkerboard pattern on here. So the checkerboard is kind of this universal way of applying a texture and seeing, you know, what common distortion that we are getting, right? So here along the sides of this actually looks pretty perfect, right? But now if we go on the top, this looks pretty sloppy, right? That's because the way that it's being unwrapped, it's going around the sides in a cylindrical way, but the tops are actually not being really optimized, and we have a lot of distortion. So something like this would not really be ideal. So old school way, you would just basically probably go in here and you could select, let's select these guys here. And I'm just growing my selection. So kind of the old school method before all the unwrap tools would go is you would do this, and then you could come down here to create, and you could apply a planar. But within the UV map editor here, or the UV editor, you can shift and right click and get those mapping options as well. So we could do a planar map, or we'll go to the option. This is important because sometimes if you don't have this checked, you'll get the mapping that you want, but you'll get distortion. So I'll go ahead and check that. And then we want to project from the top. So we'll probably want to project from the Y, and we'll hit project, and there we go, right? So now we have a projection here from the top that's capturing the flat part, and then we still have kind of that cylindrical for the side. So this is more of a old school way, but this is obviously something that you could do. Obviously here, since you have kind of these areas that are going in and you have like a small dip here, you're going to get distortion here, right? So what you could do is take this and then we could apply an unfold. So unfold, so if I'll move this up here and I'll shift and right click, we can go ahead and do an unfold, right? So I'll go ahead and do an unfold, and you see that our distortion went away, right? So traditionally, this is something that you had to do. You had to start with kind of these basic projections, figure things out, and then unfold. So these projection methods still do have some value, and you know there's plenty of good uses for them, but I'm basically going to be using the newer tools that were introduced in 2018, which I think they're truly just a game changer as far as doing UV layout within Maya. So what did I mean by the concept of texel density? Well, here we have two shells, and we'll see that this is relatively larger than this guy, right? So this top one, if we look at this, this is actually a lot smaller. Therefore, these are bigger. So think about these checkers as individual pixels. You'll see that having this shell this size is actually not a good use of texel density. And if we apply an image, we're going to get a lot more distortion here, or a lot more pixelation on this top part than we are on this bottom part, right? And if we look here, on the UV toolkit under tools, we see that if we double click this shell and we select get, this has a value of 28. And what do you guys think that this guy that's smaller is going to have as a value as far as the texel density? If we hit get, it's going to have a smaller value, right? So I'll hit get, and now we have a value of 15, right? So that has a smaller texel density, and once a texture is applied, there's going to be more distortion on that top part. So one of the cool things that Maya has introduced in 2018 is that we could actually match these up to be the same exact texel density, right? So if I'm going to go ahead and scale this up and move it here, right? And now we could go ahead and match these. So before I go ahead and do this, there might be some instances that you might want this texel density different, meaning like if I was doing a product shot and all you were going to see is, you know, something like this, and you never saw the top of the can, or maybe I'm panning around or orbiting around here, it's going to be pre-rendered. Maybe I could have pretty much this gigantic UV set or UV layout for the bottom and not really care about these that's never going to be seen. I'll select this shell here. I'll hit get. I'll get the bigger value, and then I'll select this guy, and I'll hit set, right? And now, if we look at this, this is the same texel density, right? All right, so here I have a UV layout, and I'm actually going to screw this up, but don't worry, we're going to get back to this. But usually, what I like to do is just start out with a planar map, right? So it's going to jack all this up, but that's fine. And then I'm going to go to my UV, and then I'm going to get my 3D cut and sew UV tool. And you see that I already have this hotkey because I use it a lot. So I'm going to select this, and here on the options, make sure that you could just reset the tool here. But the most important thing that you want to do is make sure that you have show UV shell coloring on. And I'm going to show you exactly what this does in a second. So what this is going to allow us to do is interactively place UV cut lines inside the 3D viewport, which is really nice and speeds up your UV workflow. So I want to make sure that I'm on edge selection here. And if we think back about that cylindrical mapping that we first created, it really created a cut line at the top, the bottom, and down the side. So we're gonna go ahead and mimic that. But before I do, I'll just show you pretty much what the tool does in its native state. If you double click kind of a edge selection, it will place a borderline there, right? The cool thing about this is that it's non-destructive, so you can go ahead and add and also subtract from it. So if you hold down Control, you'll go ahead and basically sew those edges or undo that cut line. All right, so if we think back about that original cylindrical mapping, we had a cut line here, right? And you see as soon as we double click, we get an edge loop and we don't have those continuous edges anymore. It's gonna color code this and tell us that, hey, you know what? This is now a different UV shell than this, right? And from this angle, it's hard to see. So I'm gonna go ahead and just run a quick unfold. I'll go ahead and just select my faces. I'll shift and right click, go to unfold, and then unfold again. And now, if I double click one of these UV shells, right, you see that this is now two separate UV shells, right? So let's go ahead and if I want to get back to the tool without digging all the way through, what I could do is just middle mouse click this and it'll redo the last menu command that I had set up. All right, so from here, I'll go ahead and just hide the checkerboard for the time being and make sure edges is selected as well. And then I do want to hide this seam as much as humanly possible. Hiding seams is not that big a deal like I used to. Now with packages like Mari and Substance Painter, where you're actually painting on the models, seams are not the nightmare that they used to versus like the old school Photoshop way. But just kind of a best practices, if you can't hide the seam or make it less obvious, go ahead and do so. So now we have another shell, and so there's no need to unfold it anymore because we'll kind of have a good idea what it's going to look like. Here we're getting a lot of distortion, right? So if we go here, this shell, we're getting a lot of distortion because we need a cut, kind of like that cylindrical mapping, to be able to fully unwrap and unfold these shells properly. So now if we're thinking about a product shot, where would we want that seam at? Well, looking at this, we probably wouldn't want it on the front because it has the logo. The back would probably have the nutritional information. So maybe somewhere along the side towards the back is where I want to place that cut line. So I'll go ahead and double click here. I'll go ahead and select my shell here by double clicking the faces. I'll shift right click, unfold, and then run another unfold. Now you see that we have a better UV layout. So I'm just going to go ahead and rotate this here. And this kind of segues into the next tool that I like here, which is the UV layout tool. So I'm going to go ahead and just select all our shells. I'll go to my UV editor, bring this guy up, and just kind of bring this here so we can see the options. So we have the layout option here. If we shift right click, we'll get to the options. The other method is if we have our UV editor up here, we can shift right click, go to layout, and hit the little square. That'll bring up the options. I want to make sure that rotate shells is on. I'll let it rotate shells if it needs it. And then if you know kind of your desired texture map size, that helps as well. So ideally, I'd probably shoot for a 2K for this product shot. So I'll hit 2048. I'll hit out layout UVs. It laid it out pretty efficiently. It got even texel density, right? So if we go here and we go to our, we get a texel density from the shell. It should be the same one from this one, right? So texel density is perfect. The optimization is pretty good. So if you were doing a layout for yourself, personal project, maybe something for film or video where you didn't have stringent texture requirements, this would pretty much be all that you needed. And that's good enough. But good enough in this channel is just not going to cut it. So I'm going to show you a way to really optimize these and really develop a UV layout for something that's incredibly well optimized and would work well within a game engine, right? So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this can here, right? So, and you'll see why I'm duplicating this in a second. So we'll go ahead and do Control D. And let's go ahead and I want to leave it where it is. I'll bring up my outliner here. I'll just name it Original. Okay. So I can go ahead and hide this one and then just work on this one. So what do I want to do with this? Well, these shells, they worked out pretty well, right? Like the top looks pretty good. The bottom looks pretty good. But for this side piece here, we'd ideally want a square layout. And this is not that bad, but sometimes when you run this unfold, you'll get things like C's or curves that really don't work that well as far as optimization in a square one-to-one UV space, right? So what can we do here? Well, there is an old school method called Unitize, right? What Unitize is going to do is for each polygon, it's going to basically assign it a 0 to 1 coordinate, right? So we pretty much want to work on the cut lines here. Now, the problem with Unitize is that it's going to stack everything up, and then finding these cut lines again can be problematic. But there is a little workaround that I have right here. So let's go ahead and bake in our UV seams into the mesh. That way it's actually easier to find later once we unitize this one shell, right? So I'm going to go in here and I'll select my border edges. So I'll double click here. This is the edges that we want to work with. And then I will go ahead and go in here, shift right click, and then I will select detach. So what detach is going to do is pretty much what it sounds like. It's going to physically detach those components from the mesh. So if I right click here, now you see that those edges are no longer connected. I could just simply peel that off, right? So now I'll go and what I'll do first is I'll just select these shells, move them out the way, double click this guy. I'll go ahead and go to modify, unitize. And you see what this is going to do, it's going to basically lay out each polygon to its own 0 to 1 space, right? But you see that this is not going to work, and obviously we got to go ahead and stitch this together. So I'll go ahead and right click, just make sure that I'm on edge mode. And then once I select all the edges, I can do shift right click, move, and so now we have basically our UV shell already laid out, right? And this would have been harder to actually find the border edges had we not done the detached components. So now we just want to go ahead and scale down the shell a little bit. So we still have some distortion, and that's because this still needs to be unfolded, but only in one direction. And doing it only in one direction is what's going to allow us to basically keep this perfect square shape that we have, or rectangular shape. So I'm going to go in here and then I'll shift right click and we can do an unfold, and it looks like it's going to be in the V, which is the up and down. So it's going to unfold that way. And now you see that we have this perfect UV layout. So the last thing that we need to do besides just scaling that, but we'll take care of that with the layout function, is we have this mesh that's full of border edges. So what I'm going to do here is actually transfer the UVs from this mesh to the mesh that actually had no border edges baked into the geometry. So I want the one with the UVs that I want to project onto, right? That's going to get transferred onto. So I'll select the can, and then this is the original one. So I will control click this. I'll go to mesh and I'll go to transfer attributes option. And what we want to do is just transfer this UV layout, right? So what we need is the current UV set. We want to make sure that all these are off. You can't just go here and go to reset settings. So I'll go to UV sets current. I'll keep this on sample space world and I'll hit transfer. So now we essentially transferred the good UV layout onto the mesh that the edges or components were not detached. So now I'm going to just basically delete my history. So edit, delete by type, history. We can go ahead and hide this guy right here, the original. I'm sorry. We can go ahead and hide the can. So now we're left with the mesh that we wanted with the UVs that we wanted, right? So what we could do is select these guys here, shift right click, and then we'll go ahead and go to layout, and we'll go to layout UV. And there we go. So that is a nice looking set of UVs that is optimized for whether you're doing film, personal project, and more importantly, if you're taking this into a game engine like Unity or Unreal. So some of you might be wondering, well, why didn't you use the straighten UV tool within Maya? And that tool works sometimes when it wants and sometimes when it doesn't. So if you're unaware with the tool, what I recommend is you running it and see what happens. I already tried this and it didn't work on this particular object, but I'm just gonna go here and then with this guy, I'll go ahead and get my unfold, which just kind of goes back to the layout that I had. And what you could do is if you selected an edge here and then you shift and right clicked, you can do something called straighten shell, right? So that's going to kind of straighten the shell within the layout. Double click, shift right click, and we can do something called straighten UVs. So this is what I get. This is not optimal. You could still try the tool depending on your object. You can luck out and it might do a good job, but most often than not, I do get these issues versus just kind of the method that I showed you guys that works pretty much every time. So this is the finished UV layout that I have that I basically did with the 3D cut and unfold tool like I showed you earlier. That's all that I have for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to like this video, comment, and please subscribe if you haven't done so as well for more videos like this. If you'd like to see how the can was created, you can go ahead and check out this video right here, which I cover step by step the modeling of the can. So appreciate your time as always, and I will catch you next time. Texel Density depressing you, UV Distortion, because I'm going to explain all these in my Maya UV Layout for Beginners tutorial. Learning UVs getting under your skin, Texel Density terrorizing you. Learning UVs, Texel Density terrorizing you, because I'm going to explain it in my Maya